Welcome to the Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dellis. On this episode, we take a look at the bloody history of the words period and Mittelschmerz. Mittelschmerz. Middle-smirching. While researching our previous podcast on feminine products, we came across two words that made us stop and think for a minute. Why do we call menstruation our period? And what the heck is Mittelschmerz? Okay, let's start with the word period. Get it? Periods usually end a sentence. Get it? Anyway, okay, the word period comes, of course, from the Greek words peri and hodos, meaning around or way or path. It's also derived from the Latin periodus, which means recurring cycle. But even back in ancient times, people didn't use the words perihodos or periodus when talking about menstruation. In fact, up until the 1800s, doctors didn't even know why women menstruated every month. They thought it happened so women could calm their hysterical natures. Maybe they dealt with PMS and observed that women weren't as cranky once their bleeding started and ended. Of course, that's different for everybody. I don't know.
Well, perhaps, but
just a thought.
Perhaps, but another thought would be we didn't have as many resources available to us in terms of nutrition and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes women would skip their periods because of like health or whatever. Or if you're super, super active, you don't always get a regular period. So they probably just didn't, they might not have seen a lot of that happening. And it's also probably not talked about.
All right. And what they did see was their hysterical natures because they're getting PMSy, they're getting cranky, and they're emotional. Women tend to be more emotional in general, but even more so on their periods. And if you're going through puberty, it makes it worse, right? The emotional aspect of it. So those ancient dudes were like, what the heck? We have to calm her hysterical
Men
nature.
have their monthlies. Men have their monthlies too, but like, why not just blame the women as the only ones?
Yeah, but they don't bleed. And all of a sudden they start bleeding. The women start bleeding and the ancient people were like, oh, okay. Now
it becomes like a reason or an excuse, yeah. So what did they call menstruation before the 1800s? Well, in the late 1400s to early 1600s, periods were called, quote-unquote, courses. And doctors back then thought it happened because the body had too much blood in it. And if it didn't come out, the woman would drown.
That makes sense.
Doesn't it? No. I mean, what were they thinking about men? Did men not have this buildup of blood? And they did with some medical practices we'll have to talk about in another podcast. But It's just, okay, fine.
It's so funny the way they used to think.
I know.
Not too long ago.
I know. It wasn't that long ago. You're right. So Eve's curse has also been thrown around, obviously blaming Eve from the infamous Adam and Eve for her original sin, which is why women began bleeding every month. When doctors began relying on medicine as opposed to magic, they began using clinical terms such as menses or catamenia. Of course, they were also calling it a woman's quote-unquote monthly evacuation.
No, excavation.
Why did I say evacuation? That's disgusting.
Actually, I bet you anything
they probably
people
used
did
it.
use monthly evacuation and excavation. I think both of them have been used, and I don't know why we don't have both in there. So
I know, right?
Keep it in.
Yeah, so right. And natural
purgation? Like, I don't even know why anybody would call a period that.
I don't either.
I'm having my...
I guess
sorry.
it's like, well, it's a purging.
I'm having cramps because of my natural purgation. That it doesn't flow off the tongue, and neither does catamenia. Like, oh my God, that cramp was so awful because of my catamenia.
Yeah, no.
It sounds like you have some, like, STD or something.
Let's examine some of the definitions.
That's me.
Then why aren't you talking?
I don't know. Let's examine some of the definitions throughout the centuries. In the early 1400s, periode, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, Periode, was defined as, quote, a course or extent of time, a cycle of recurrence of a disease, end quote. This makes sense since menstruation occurs every month in a cycle and lasts a specific number of days, and people of that time believed menstruation was a type of disease. Merriam-Webster defines period in a similar way today. Quote, the completion of a cycle, a portion of time determined by some recurring phenomenon, end quote. However, it added an extra definition in the 20th century, quote, a single cyclic occurrence of menstruation, end quote.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the use of the word period to describe ovulation and insemination first appeared in 19th century medical books, such as The Study of Medicine by John Mason Good from 1822 and reprinted in 1900. Quote, the exact day between any two periods of menstruation in which semination has taken effect, end quote. However, that still doesn't use period as a term for menstruation. It uses it as a description for the time between menstruation and when semen enters the vagina.
Oh, God, that's so vulgar. I can't believe you just said that.
That's what it says. That's part of how we have to describe it.
Oh, my God.
What do you want me to say?
I don't know. Keep going.
The Oxford English Dictionary says that medical books in 1879 first used quote-unquote period to describe menstruation. Quote, her habit is for the periods to reoccur every 5 weeks, rather freely, end quote. And it turns up in advertisements placed in places like Women's Magazine starting around 1891 that is selling ladies' period towels. It wasn't until 1985 that television ads would begin to use quote-unquote period when referencing menstruation. Tampax hired Courtney Cox for that commercial, and still saying it out loud was uncomfortable for most. It kind of reminds me of this new commercial that I just saw recently where there are all these women talking about poop, but the word gets edited out because various platforms don't want to talk about it.
Well, what were they saying? So they, instead of saying, I just had to go poop, and instead of saying poop, what did they say?
So it was like, there was like a narrator, and these women are like, they're like, women do this too, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, are you talking about and then they're like, they almost say a P for the poop. And then a guy goes, yes, I'm talking about personal space or something like that, and like throws in these other P words, and it just like, and it keeps going, and then all these women are popping up, and you're like, you're talking about women do, and it was like this whole thing.
But
and
what was the commercial for?
It was for actually a product to help women be more regular, and the whole point of the ad, in a really weird way, is almost, it's like a parody of itself, because some platforms don't actually still, like, I think some cable channels and stuff, they don't want to talk about women pooping, but yet it's like they do. So it's like almost like we're hiding something. So it was kind of a parody
commercial for it?
Kind of, but it's also like they also had to edit out the word. So they made it. Or
did they edit it on purpose to be funny?
Both. They were like, some places wouldn't even run the ad, so they edited it.
Really?
Yeah, they edited it anyway to make it funny, but also it's like highlighting, it's like, why are we not able to talk about this? This is a normal issue.
We talk about our periods on commercials all the time now.
And they always, have you ever noticed they always have like Mylanta commercials? Mm-hmm. That's talking about diarrhea, but think about it.
Erectile dysfunction. I mean, we could talk about all sorts of weird, uncomfortable subjects for people except for poop.
Because it's women pooping. It has nothing to do with men pooping. It's women pooping.
Specific to women.
It's a specific
because girls
commercial.
Don't poop.
No, we don't poop. And women don't fart. We don't smell bad. We don't sweat.
We glisten.
We glisten.
Yeah. Well, what about other countries and cultures? Do they use the word period too? There are well over 5,000 slang terms and euphemisms for it, and according to a 2016 international survey conducted by Clue with the International Women's Health Coalition, most of them come from outside the U.S. The survey is based on 90,000 responses from 190 countries, and the euphemisms were found in 10 languages. Here are some of my favorites in English. Aunt Flo.
I've used that one.
I know, we use that one too. Code Red. Crimson Tide, which I believe is poor University of Alabama's motto.
Oh, no.
I know. Shark Week. And having the painters in, which I've never heard, but I'm totally going to start using that.
Oh, my gosh.
Like when my sons are like, oh, Mom, are you on your period? I'm like, yeah, I'm totally having the painters in right now.
That's funny. There are some fun ones in other languages, too, which, I'm going to butcher, but here it goes. In Sweden, they called periods Lungan Veckin, which means like lingonberry week. And lingonberries are like cranberries, and they're used to make jellies. Basically, go to an IKEA and get a jar. And that's similar to Germany's term for period, which is Erdbeerwoche, or strawberry week. Finland.
It's strawberry week.
It's strawberry week today. I'm going to walk up to Michael and be like, some other week, I'm like, it's Erdbeerwoche or something. And he'd be like, what? So Finland, on the other hand, gets really weird and calls periods Hulum leek manto tea or mad cow disease.
What? I don't get that at all.
I don't either. Women are not that bad. I think that
We're
people
foaming at the mouth.
I know.
And, like,
I know. I mean, some women can be like a little on the crazy side, and other women are not.
I need somebody, whoever's listening in Finland, or if you're of Finnish descent and you have heard of that before, please explain. Please explain that to us. Mad cow disease. I want to say it. Hulum lekman-tauti?
Yeah.
That's just awesome to say. I love that.
China's is fun too, and I can't say it in their language, but it basically means its little sister has come.
Whose little sister?
Its little sister. I don't know whose little sister, but that week she's here. So it's got to be like, like an Aunt Flo's visiting kind of situation, but this one's a little sister.
Aunt Flo and her little sister.
Oh, no. Okay, here's the last one. Another one that I can't even attempt to say in its native language is what South African women say when referring to their periods. And that's grannies stuck in traffic.
Oh my God, she's totally stuck in traffic. Wait. Who's the granny in this situation?
I don't know, but I'm picturing a granny who's driving with like Coke bottle glasses.
Right.
And she's like...
The curlers in her hair.
Yeah, curlers in her hair. And she's like road raging. Get out of the way, you know?
Is she driving down the period highway?
I bet she's like driving in between lanes and mad at everyone who's trying to pass her and honk behind her. That's what
God.
I'm picturing when I think of Granny stuck in traffic.
But because
Granny's creating the traffic.
If you're picturing Granny in your vaginal canal,
nobody
in blood
is going to be picturing Granny
is the traffic
into your vaginal
blood
canal.
flow and Granny is the pain, or is Granny the blood flow and the traffic is all the pain and cramping?
I think it has more to do with some of the personality changes that can happen for some women where they just get cranky pants.
So if there are any South African women out there right now, please explain that to us too. I'm really curious. I'd also like to hear it in their native language, which we cannot even pronounce at all.
No, but I think it's really cool though that like it to me it sounds like with a lot of these it's like there's jokes around this.
There totally are jokes. I love it. And it's not just in Western culture too. It's like all over the world because all women do it.
All women.
And we all poop and we all get our period. Oh wait, women don't poop. I forgot. We all get our period, and so people just come up with these really great ways to talk about it so that they don't have to say we're bleeding or whatever they say. We're menstruating. We have catamenia.
I know, and we don't really mention this here, but like, I mean, I'm so glad that we're like giving it a voice and talking about it. Because like we've talked in some of our other podcasts, like they didn't even talk about this stuff. And so women, this would happen and they're like, I don't know what this means. You know, if you think about a little girl who's never had her period, doesn't know what it is, and all of a sudden it happens, you're like, what is this?
And you go tell your mom.
Or you don't.
Granny's stuck in traffic.
Yes.
That's what you can tell your daughter.
That's what you can tell your daughter.
Oh my gosh. Well, I like some of the political ones, like Brazil's. They say, "Uso com Chico," which means I'm with Chico, referring to the socialist Chico Mendes. And Denmark has some fun with periods too, although I can't imagine saying it every time you tell someone you have your period. It seems rather long, but it's totally funny. Denmark says, "Der kommunister I Leisthuset." Okay, I butchered that, I know. I'm sorry, Denmark. What it means is, there are communists in the funhouse. Okay, again, so the funhouse is the vagina?
I think
and
you're being
the blood?
I think you're being way too literal. But maybe.
And the French say, "Les Anglais ont débarqué." Clearly, I didn't take French in high school. And that means the English have landed.
Definitely political.
Oh my gosh, it's bad.
That's hilarious. Now it's that time of the month. That's what you put me to say.
It is that time of the month.
Okay. Now it's that time of the month to talk about Mittelschmerz. You may be asking yourself, what the heck is Mittelschmerz? And you wouldn't be the only one. Now, there's no really cool, weird history necessarily behind Mittelschmerz. It's just a cool, weird word, and we like saying it.
Mittelschmerz.
The word Mittelschmerz is actually of German origin, meaning middle or middle, and Schmerz or pain. So basically middle pain. It was coined in the 1890s and was first mentioned in 1891 in the Lancet, which is a weekly English medical journal that was started in 1823.
According to authors Nathan Brott and Jacqueline Lee from an article published on Stat Pearls, quote, Mittelschmerz, or ovulation pain, as it is commonly known today, is a benign pre-ovulatory lower abdominal pain that occurs mid-cycle between days 7 and 24 in women, not in men. Because they had to put in women, like we don't know. Sorry. Mittelschmerz may affect over 40% of women of reproductive age, and it occurs almost every month in these patients. It generally does not begin until a few years following menarche. What the heck's menarche?
That's when you start your first period.
Menarche is your first period.
Yeah, it's like puberty.
Menarche is the word we say when we're talking about the first time the communists enter the funhouse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like when you have your like very first, like that's what that is. Like the onset of menarche that's what it is.
Oh, menarche?
I thought it was menarche.
I have no idea. I've never seen the word before. Okay, menarche. It sounds fancier. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like I said, it generally does not begin until a few years following menarche, when the true ovulatory cycles become established. Pain varies in severity from a mild ache to agonizing pain and is generally felt near the ovaries on the same side as the developing follicle, end quote.
Continuing with that, quote, Mittelschmerz has been found to coincide with a peak in plasma luteinizing hormone, or LH, levels when the follicle is enlarging and is not yet ruptured. However, Mittelschmerz is unlikely due to follicular distension. Rather, the LH rise increases ovarian perifollicular smooth muscle contractory via a prostaglandin medicated pathway, potentially producing pain, end quote. Oh my gosh.
That was awesome.
Basically, what all of that means is that between your period or mid-cycle, middle of cycle, right? Mm-hmm. Some women experience a little discomfort or pain near one of their ovaries that's about to release the egg. So it's basically the woman is feeling herself ovulating.
Okay, so it's feeling yourself ovulate. It has nothing to do with your cramping once your period starts.
No, but it feels like a dull ache. Sometimes it could be like more of a pain, but it's not a cramping pain. It's like a pain.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Mittelschmerz.
Yeah, I found out about this term because I was Mittelschmerching after my daughter was born. And I remember being like, what is this? Like, because my period wasn't coming.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, because I learned about the term and I'm like, this term is great. I'm like, what is this? And she's like, oh, you're Mittelschmerz. You have Mittelschmerz or something like that. And so I've decided if I ever have that, I'm like, oh, I'm Mittelschmerching today. Because it usually lasts a couple of hours to a couple of days, depending.
Crazy.
It is crazy, but it's a pretty good tell if you are like trying to like, clock your cycle. It's like a really good sign of, okay, this is what's happening. So now I know like,
and then
what's happening in a couple, like only a handful more days and you start your period.
And then roughly 2 weeks after that, that's typically when Granny would get stuck in traffic.
That's when Granny would get stuck in traffic. Exactly.
Got it.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at the Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at the Unusual History of Everything podcast. And find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for the Unusual History of Everything. Da, 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 da.